Greetings. I am Dorothy Dowling, a principal of DEI Advisors. Welcome to It's Personal Stories, a hospitality podcast that highlights the inspiring journeys of leaders in the hospitality industry. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to personal empowerment. I am delighted to welcome Stacey Barber, Vice President Travel, AAA National. Stacey, it's an honor to have you with us today.
It's an honor to be here, Dorothy. Thank you so much for having me today.
Let's get started, Stacey.
Sounds
I
great.
am hoping you will share your career journey with us. You've had an amazing career in the e-commerce and digital marketing space, as well as your leadership role with AAA National, being a technology leader and now an executive for the travel group, serving the hospitality supplier space and the Federation of AAA Clubs. I am hoping you will give us some insights on how you got started and evolved your career into the hospitality business leader you are today.
Oh, I look forward to it. I can't wait to spend some time with you and all your guests. So, starting out, I have a personal mantra. I really live my life this way, not just professionally, but personally. And I try to find gratitude in every day. And I didn't always do that. And I started off as a computer programmer, which, as you can imagine, was a very male dominated career. And I am an extrovert, and it just did not suit me. And so I made some questions in my life of, is this really the life that I want to build for myself? And I decided, no, I want to really use that business side of my career. I have a management information system degree, so I have the business side and the technology side. And at the time, I felt that there was a gap in the business world, corporate America, around having someone who understands technology and could articulate it to the business leaders that were driving and making those business decisions. And then in turn, taking those business needs and relaying it over to the people that were making this new digital transformation across multiple industries. And so I really honed in on that early in my career. And it just led from one thing to another. And I can't wait to talk more in depth about it today with you, because I truly feel that I have been blessed in so many ways, both personally and professionally.
Thank you for sharing that, Stacey. I know that today they often talk about generalists are being really the future executives because you're able to connect dots across multiple areas in the business. And I certainly think technology drives so much of that consideration, but having that business leadership, I think, really empowers you to see the world and be able to support some of the business outcomes that I know that you're responsible for driving. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about career champions, because most people that we speak with have had some important mentors and allies in their career that have really shaped their career. So I'm wondering if you could share any stories you might have about ones that have been important to you.
Absolutely. And Dorothy, like anything, you and I have had the pleasure of talking multiple times. And, I always try to look at it from two perspectives, right? And I would say the first thing that has shaped me was early in my career. As I mentioned, I was in the programming space, and there was no women at that time. And it was very introverted. And I made a decision at that point very early on. I'd say it was probably my first year out of college. If I ever moved into leadership executive roles down my career, I wanted to make sure that I was a mentor and something for other women to have the ability to reach out to and talk to and help guide. And it wasn't because at the time I had great mentorship coming to me. It was that lesson that I learned of something that I wasn't getting, that I was missing. And I think that was just as critical as the fantastic career champions that I've had the fortunate opportunity to work with in my career. Quite honestly, I would say the last 10 years have really been where those champions have come out. And I attribute it to a few things. One, I think I know and started understanding where I wanted to go professionally. I also had a sense of self more so than I had earlier in my career. And I had the ability to really articulate the things that I was looking for, challenges that I was facing. But you also reach a point where you don't care as much what other people think of you, and you can be free to be yourself, right? So that facade of, oh, am I making so and so happy, it really falls to the wayside. And I think that was the beginning of being able to accept those career champions into my life. I have them both personally as well as professionally, some in the travel industry, some not. And as I reflect, it's really a cool concept that they're both male and female. And I've really seen that shift where men are more supportive of women than they've ever been. And they too are coming along on that journey with us and want us to be successful and have a seat at the table. And I think that is something that really reaps the benefit for any organization, or I like to call them tribes, because I really have a pretty big tribe in my life.
That's important. Are there any particular stories of individual mentors that have meant a lot to you, Stacey?
There is. I have Paula Twidell, who is retiring at the end of the year. She is a senior vice president. She's been an icon in the industry for many of us, right? Cindy Zesk also works with AAA. She did it, and it really came through friendship. And we were mentoring each other through things. And Jason Hossefluck, our CFO here at AAA, he believed in me and saw things in me 9 years ago that I didn't see or knew about myself. So, AAA really has brought forth that opportunity, I think. And Dorothy, you have been an icon for so many of us. I look up to you, and I think that if I can be in the place you are in a few years, then I have done well.
Thank you for sharing that, Stacey. And I share the admiration of many of the individuals that you mentioned in terms of just the way they have propelled AAA forward and really maintained its relevancy from being a brand that has been around for a very long time, continuing to bring that value creation as well as innovation to the kinds of solutions that you bring, not only to the members, but to all of your stakeholders. So thank you for sharing that. I know earlier you spoke about your intentionality of your career journey and how you made some pretty significant choices about some of the career options you wanted to explore. I'm wondering if there are ways that you could expand on some of the risks that you've taken in your career and share what that meant to you, how it drove some of your outcomes, and how it really allowed you to grow both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. I was working for a very top tier brand, and it was an organization here in the Orlando area that everybody wanted to work for outside of AAA. And at the time, I had a fantastic opportunity with them running their digital marketing department for some very high level brands. Someone I had worked with previously called me and said, "Hey, I have this opportunity at a digital agency here in Orlando." And at the time, I wasn't really looking. And I sat back and talked about it with my husband and friends. And I said, this really would give me the opportunity to have a more well rounded lens and view of the business at hand. And it was actually a pay cut, it was a demotion and title, salary. But I truly believe the experience that you gain is far greater than the title and the salary. And so I took it, and people thought I was crazy. They're like, "You don't leave the company like that." And I said, I have a very intentional reason for it. And it really brought together my brand opportunity, that brand lens. I then had a digital agency lens, a digital marketing. And after I was there for a few years, I moved on to that hospitality and travel lens. And it has all blended together, and it's really given me a lot of opportunities to learn different aspects of the business. And technology has always driven each of those roles, and how technology helps foster innovation and forward movement in the business world. And I believe that all of those intentional moves really helped me prepare for the role I'm in today here at AAA.
I think that's really great advice. And that story that you shared, I would say other leaders have shared similar kinds of decisions that they made in their career where they often took a step back to really grow some of their competencies, to broaden their reach of understanding, particularly in business applications, and how it really powered their career forward. It's a very courageous move to take a pay cut, a title cut, and to actually leave a job that has a lot of visibility and credibility. But I do think that intentionality of mapping your career, Stacey, that is what real executives, they think about the investment in their career and the growth that will come through it. So I commend you for having the courage to make that decision.
Thank you, Dorothy. I have to say I recognize not everyone has that opportunity. And it really has a lot to do with the support structure and again, that tribe. I have been extremely blessed with a supportive husband who has been able to be with me at each of those steps along my career and supportive, and we'll figure it out. As long as you're happy and you're doing what makes you happy each day, then we'll be in a good place.
That is a very important message that you signaled there, Stacey, is that having a support network that allows you to make some of those courageous decisions. We never work alone.
Yeah.
And so having someone that particularly when you're an important contributor to the financial health of your family, to make some of those decisions, it does have to be a decision that's made together. So I know how fortunate you are to have a partner that is so vested in your career success as well as your role as a parent. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about being an association business leader, because that has some very unique components to it, one of which is the number of stakeholders that you support and the way that decisions are made, often through a consensus of a number of individuals contributing. I'm just wondering how you actually work within that environment and how you drive business outcomes and really build that support for that consensus building in terms of the decisions that need to be made in your role.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dorothy. It's actually a pretty simple. It's all about listening. Every interaction I have, whether it's someone on my team who needs help or a partner or a colleague or someone at the clubs, they want to feel heard, right? They want to feel like you're listening, that you're there for them. And every person, every relationship, there's a need and a want, right? And it's listening to understand those drivers of what makes something valuable to that person. And once you start listening, I believe more than talking, right? You really understand what is going to be mutually beneficial for what you're trying to achieve. And at the association level, we have a multitude of clubs who have different needs and different benefits. And if you just take the time to listen, to understand, sometimes we can get what everybody wants, right? But other times we're not able to do X, but we were able to achieve Y. The reason is because this is what's best for the association. And I think if you invest that time in that relationship, it helps those conversations to make sure that everyone understands you're working for the betterment of our members and for AAA as a whole. And transparency is essential in that as well, making sure that we're all working together and it's not an us versus them mentality. But I would say listening, transparency, and open lines of communication, I would say, are the three key drivers that really brings that cohesiveness together.
That leads us into the next question, because I do believe everything that you've said, Stacey, in terms of listening and looking for the mutuality in terms of how to create wins for everyone in the equation. I know in your particular situation, you've got some really powerful stakeholders in terms of size of clubs, and then you have some what I would call medium stakeholders that are important, but certainly do not have the same membership base and the same financial kind of backing, I guess would be the word I would use. So can you describe a challenging situation where you've had to navigate very different stakeholder points of view and how you've been able to really support and get to the desired outcome?
Sure. So it definitely varies on any given day and topic of how and what is the best way to navigate that. It is about making sure, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's about making sure that everyone is heard. I would say the large and mega clubs, they have very similar needs. and understanding what they're looking for in support from AAA Inc. and our team is very different than what the small and mid-sized clubs necessarily need. And so it's making sure that we have those open communications. I try to meet with the travel executives across all clubs on a quarterly basis to say, how are things going? What are your needs? What are your wants? How can we better support you? And how can AAA Inc. as a whole make sure that you guys are successful at the club level? The travel subcommittee also is a great source. I think they really are the unsung heroes for travel. They represent all club sizes. And so when we have strategic conversations or negotiations, we make sure that every voice is heard. And so it can be challenging of who gets the bigger voice, but it's making sure, again, that everyone is heard. And we try to make sure that while you may not get everything that your club needs, that we do meet somewhere in the middle to make sure that all ships rise together.
I think you've highlighted a very important part of the governance structure of AAA, which I think is something that our audience can learn from, because I do think the committee structure and the way that you actually select people to participate and represent the broader stakeholder group is really important, because you do have middle-sized clubs on the subcommittee, of course, and then you have the big clubs. But I think that representation and allowing them to really be a listening, a learning, a proxy for the larger organization to test ideas and be someone that can help you move along some of that consensus that's needed for decision making is a really powerful structure in AAA. And I know AAA has been around a very long time, so you've learned a lot about governance. But I do know that governance is becoming a much bigger conversation in lots of organizations today to do exactly the kind of things that you're talking about, Stacey, to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that they have a representative that is really articulating their positions. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more about situations that might have been more challenging, where you had to face adversity. How did that shape you as a leader?
From an adversity standpoint, and I would say this is experience and age, right? I think that my younger self always felt, especially as I was progressing in my career, that with each step, I had to know more and to be able to achieve more and more. And quite honestly, I think it's the opposite, right? I think you understand that you don't have to know all the answers. I think the sign of a good leader is having smarter people around you, right? And recognizing that it's okay to ask for help and you don't have to do it all alone. And when you take that pressure off of yourself as an emerging leader early in your career, I think it really starts broadening your opportunities and not focusing so much on driving that consensus to what I know and what I can do. And it releases those, I hate to use the word chains, but it does, right? It really opens those doors and it drives innovation and it drives change. And I think through adversity, I have some interesting situations where I came into AAA, into governance meetings, and I'm like, here's how we're going to do it. And I was very, this is where we are, this is where we need to go, and this is how we're going to get there. And that is what created the adversity, not the fact that we needed to change or that I was wrong. It was, I didn't take a step back and I didn't stop and get their input, and I didn't have them in lockstep and going through this in a collaborative approach. And that, to me, if I look back, is really where adversity starts around here at AAA, right? Is when we're not bringing everyone together to do it collectively. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of voices, there's a lot of different size clubs, but we're all working towards the same goal, right? And that is to make members' dreams come true. And it's a very powerful thing. And the great thing is, like, AAA Inc. is here to support clubs. And so we really want to make sure that we're doing what they want us to do, versus us telling them what we're going to do. And I think that mindset really helps change that adversity that we face.
No, I think that's a very important message that you've sent to our audience, Stacey, because it is when we move from that telling approach and more to how do we build alignment, identify problems together, brainstorm different solutions, and really start to prioritize the right solutions for the right time. And I do think that's part of a leadership journey. I also think the conversation that you started with in terms of moving more from an individual contributor to moving to leading through other people, those are very important steps in one's career development. And it is really hard to go from someone that is a doer to someone that is going to do it through others. So I think the way that you characterize some of that journey and releasing yourself from the boundaries of trying to do it all and allowing others to lead some of those functions and do it in their own way is an important part of our leadership journey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about change, because you've obviously made some pretty significant career choices. How did you approach and adapt to some of these changes in both your career and your personal life when you made some of these trade-offs in your career?
Sure. Some of them I was much better at than others, both personally and professionally. I really try to take a step back. I am a Libra, and so by nature, I like balance in my life. And when things change, when I'm starting to see change, I have a tendency to start formulating things in my head of, oh, this is going to be really good, and here's why, and here's the potential reasons that it could not go well. And I used to find myself dwelling on the negative. This is why it won't work, which is strange because I am in technology. I love innovation. And so I love change, but I like to be the change agent. And so when change would happen to me and I didn't have the control, I had a tendency to go towards that negative mind space. And that is what helped shape my mantra of gratitude every day. And it really was through that change in adversity situations that you can't dwell on what's going to go bad, right? I think it is about what is positive about this change. How is it going to impact your team, your organization, and yourself? And then what can you do to help mitigate anything that could negatively be impacted? And so having that change of mindset from negative to positive over to controlling what you can control with the mitigation really helped me deal with change throughout the course of my career. And I think now looking back, it probably gave me gray hair a few years earlier than I needed it. I had a tendency to be a bull in a china cabinet back in the day. And I think it goes back to, as a woman leader, and trying to always make sure that I had the right answer. And maybe it drives back into confidence, right? Because as we grow and we experience, we develop stronger confidence and experiences that shape things. So I think it all ties together, quite honestly.
I respect you being so vulnerable, Stacey, and that self-awareness of who you are and the journey you went on that leadership, because I do think making a lot of those decisions around trying to remain positive, because I think as a leader, everyone looks to you. So if you signal positive things, then people will follow.
Mm-hmm.
I also think about understanding what you can and cannot control. Yep. And actually thinking through the things you can control and trying to put some guardrails and some contingency plans in place. Those are really important things from a leadership point of view. But I do think remaining positive is something that we all need to, because as a leader, we're always on stage. And it is important that others take their confidence through us. I admire that you can be so open about that journey that you went through and how you have developed up that mental strength to be able to manage yourself in those situations, because that is a true mark of an executive, when you can manage yourself and be that self-aware. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dorothy. I appreciate that.
I'm wondering if we can talk about work-life balance. I know you're a parent, you have a very demanding job, you do a lot of travel, I think more
Yeah.
now in this role than you probably did in your prior one.
Yes.
How do you manage all of your responsibilities at home and at work and manage yourself in terms of your own personal wellness?
Yes. Pre-COVID, when I started having both a family and a career, it was work-life balance. But I think it's really evolved into work-life integration, and it is making sure that and being okay with it personally, right? Like mentally, that some days it's just, I am not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z at home because I have a board meeting that I have to prepare for. Or, you know what, those emails can wait tonight. I'm going to my son's soccer game. And it's making sure that you are prioritizing the needs at both work and at home collectively. And it's not, here's the list I have to do at home and here's the list I have to do at work, because it's never going to be in balance. And when you can bring those together, I think it works more in harmony than when you think of them as your separate tasks, because you've got 16 hours of your day that you've got to fill with both. And prioritizing both of those lists together, I think, has been very helpful for me. And again, I have a support system that really helps and steps in when I am traveling, which helps reduce some of the stress and the burden and allows me to do the role that I do today. And you asked about strategies and how I keep my mental health. I will be vulnerable again. So early in the year, I started with a daily checklist of things I was going to do for myself. One was I was going to get 10,000 steps in. I was going to read for 45 minutes every day. I was going to get 60 ounces of water, and I was going to take my vitamins. And I was doing it religiously. And I truly felt, unfortunately, I can't say that I have been keeping up with that mantra since moving into this new role. But I feel like I'm finally getting at a place where I can bring that back into this integration. And you go through peaks and valleys, and we have to be okay and understand that. And the goal I'm setting after the board meeting in December is getting back to that inner self. Because if I'm not mentally healthy, then I can't be there for my family. I can't be there for the team, and I can't be there for the people that I support here at AAA. So I think it's another situation where things ebbs and flows, but doing that mental check-in, I think, is the criticality of where you're at, and make those adjustments as you go through.
I think that's a very mature way to evaluate your current state, Stacey, because I do think that we all have to give ourselves permission sometimes to fall off the rails of a lot of good intentions that we might have, and to not judge ourselves harshly for some of those circumstances, because it's trade-offs. It's just like when you had said before about making choices to be there for your family and being choices to be there for your work. I think sometimes we have to also give ourselves permission that sometimes those things collide, and we do give up some of our own personal well-being at some of those. But it is being aware enough that when you have to make those reinvestments and giving yourself the space and time to do that for yourself, to make sure you do take care of yourself. So again, I think I wish when I was at a younger stage in my career, that I gave myself a little more permission, because I do think we sometimes are too harsh in terms of evaluating ourselves, and sometimes giving ourselves a little goodwill like we do to others in our lives goes a long way.
I agree. We are our own worst critic, for sure.
For sure. For sure. Stacey, I just had the privilege of seeing you lead the conference in Oceanside I think that might have been 2 weeks ago. You are a very good public speaker, and you bring a different generational perspective in terms of your leadership on content and your stage presence, and just some of the ideas that you have in terms of connecting with individuals that are in the audience. I'm wondering if you can share how you have really honed your public speaking skills, and quite frankly, how you prepare, because that was a pretty intense event, 3 full days, morning, noon, and night, all very different, demanding environments. How do you prep yourself for that? And how do you really bring your best self to those kinds of events?
Dorothy, thank you so much for that. If you would have told me when I started working at AAA that I would be on stage and doing public speaking, I would have told you were nuts, because I was deathly afraid of public speaking. In fact, in college, I had to take my speech or my presentation class 3 times because I would drop it right before the time, because I would be ready to give my first presentation and it would just give me a anxiety. But I will say this, I think going back to mentors. So Paula was a big believer, and her predecessor, Bill Sutherland, they both wanted to make sure that all travel leaders had an opportunity to present on stage. And I think over the course of my career, I've been given a lot of opportunities in a lot of different arenas, and not just at the travel conference, but at board meetings with CEOs. And it's understanding how you're going to represent yourself in AAA Inc. And I've evolved, right? So I used to be extremely scripted, so much to the point where you could tell I was reading a script, right? And I thought that was success. I'm like, yes, I'm up there, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And as you get used to it, as you start being, again, more confident and more aware of the vision and the strategy and having a hand in developing and executing it, you know your stuff, right? And so from a prepared standpoint, I will generally script things out at the very beginning of here's what I want to accomplish. And then each time I go through it in my head, or when I'm drafting the materials, I'm like, okay, this can be succinct this way. And by the end, it's really bullet points of just the main points that I want to hit on. But I think a lot of people do that. I think what I believe sets apart is I try to be very open and very transparent. And I don't mind being vulnerable on stage and sharing personal things about myself. I think it comes off as more authentic, and it helps you bring that in, because I don't want to just sit here and regurgitate stats and facts and this and that. It's about telling a story. It's about bringing people in the audience along with you to feel the passion and the excitement and the highs and the lows of the successes and the failures. And I think it's also about being okay with failure, right? I think that historically we have always been one to talk about all of our wins in our hat, right? I believe true learning comes from when we don't succeed, and what could we have done differently? How could we have changed things? And that to me has really helped hone those skills. And I know it's a whole potpourri of things, Dorothy, but I truly believe that all of those aspects fall into that speaking realm and brings together a more authentic, excitable, and tangible opportunity to address with your audience.
Yeah, and I think you've said some really important things there, Stacey. One is I think it's a journey of actually putting your content together and giving yourself the time to evolve it and really get it down to very succinct in terms of a few items that are really important. And I think that whole concept of putting the billets together to make sure those are the key messages that you deliver, that's really important. But I also think what I hear from you, it's really about bringing yourself forward and being your authentic self, because you are an extrovert, you're very warm and engaging. And I think allowing you to be able to demonstrate who you are on stage connects with the audience because they respond to you as a person. And I think that is what I saw on stage at Oceanside. Is it was just the person of Stacey Barber on stage that was connecting with the audience as her authentic self. So I think both messages are important. I think you always have to prepare, but I think being confident in who you are and being able to be who you are, I think it gives everyone else permission to be who they are too. And I think that's what makes you so relatable. So congratulations on the event. I thought it was an incredible event. It had an awful lot of content in it, but I also think it was digestible and very meaningful for those that got to attend, and has really changed over the years in terms of, I think, making it so much more valuable for everybody in the room by allowing us all to participate in different ways. So, anyways, I just wanted to say congratulations.
Thank you, Dorothy. That means a lot coming from you. So thank you.
We're coming up near the end of the interview now, Stacey, and we always ask if you could go back and give advice to your younger self. What might you share with your younger self in terms of valuable insights and other things that may have been things that you would have liked to have heard?
Yeah, I think I touched on it earlier. I felt like early in my career, I was my harshest critic. And it didn't matter what I did, there was always something I could have done better or I could have done differently. And I think part of that is innate in myself as a collegiate athlete and just always striving to improve. But I think the biggest thing is don't be so hard on yourself. Yes, learn from your mistakes, right? But put your pants on the next day and move on, right? There's no sense to get into your head and doubt yourself, because you are who you are and you are going to be successful in whatever way your life was meant to be successful. And sometimes you think, I'm going here, and your life takes you here. And you have to be open to that. And I think every experience happens for a reason. And you may not see it at the time, but don't stress out about it. Just take that experience, enjoy that journey, and loosen up on yourself.
I think that is really great advice. There's a couple of things that you said. I know that lots of recruiters like hiring athletes because they fundamentally believe the discipline that individuals learn through their athletic journey really powers their executive functions over time. But I also just think that self-awareness, Stacey, and giving yourself permission to fail and not to overthink it. And then I, like you, I'm one of those people that often gets involved in the forensic of overthinking something and saying woulda, coulda, should have. But I do think that's good advice for anyone early in their career to lighten the load a little bit and not be so critical of themselves, because there is good learning that comes from mistakes. Mm-hmm. And the learning is what the outcome is that we all want to have. So thank you for, again, being so vulnerable and sharing that.
Of course.
So now we are coming up to the very final piece. And I don't know if there's any final advice that you'd like to offer to our audience in terms of empowering their personal success.
So I would say that my recommendation is to take ownership of your career. I think a lot of people think when you have a mentor or someone that you're looking up to that they're going to tell you what you need to do. You need to do X, Y, and Z to get to this spot. There's no blueprint, right? Everybody is different. Everybody's journey is different. Everyone's career is different. And really, mentors and leaders are here to guide, right? But you have to find the life that makes you happy, and you have to create that, right? And so it's empowering personal success. I love your tagline, but I believe it, right? Each person has to empower their own success and bring people along on that journey that are going to support that are going to guide that can help share insights and lessons learned. So maybe you don't repeat those, but you own your own destiny. And I really believe that.
Again, I think that's a very powerful message for our audience. It really is about being the author of your own story and owning that journey yourself. So I thank you for sharing that with all of us, Stacey. It's an important message for everyone to hear and to continue to hear, because I think we sometimes lose a little bit of that as we face different situations in our career. So thank you for that. And if I could, I would also like to thank our audience. So if you've enjoyed this interview, I hope you'll visit us on our website. It's personalstories.com, where you'll see other leaders like Stacey through webcasts and podcasts. And I know that many of them will continue to empower your knowledge and fuel your spirit. So we hope to see you there. Thanks again, Stacey, for sharing so much of your wisdom with us today. It was really great to have you with us.
Thank you, Dorothy, for having me. It's always a pleasure spending time with you. And thank you to everyone watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.